Guys, for those of you who don't know, and I'll give a more formal introduction as I go through this, I'm Jim Fitzmaurice, better known as Jimmy Mack. I am the former host of the Dave Nemo Show on Thursdays and Fridays on Sirius XM, and Dave Nemo Weekends on Saturdays and Sundays on Sirius XM. I have since sunset an 8-month effort to kind of launch another platform called Road Gang Radio and Nemo Nation. I'm kind of taking that off in a sunset way here today. I wanted to thank you all for coming in. I haven't done one of these in a while. I haven't actually gotten up here and done any public speaking in a while. So one of the things that I like to do, always have done, and kind of set people up for this is there won't be time for questions afterwards. There'll be time for questions as we go, which means if you want to be a part of the conversation with me, if you want to jump into the conversation, just raise your hand. Don't feel like, and I will actually, even if I'm finishing a thought, I'll be like, I'll get with you in 1 minute and then come back to you. But I promise you, if that hand goes up for clarification or misunderstanding or to kind of maybe expand on a point, do not feel like that you have to sit here in respectful silence. If you've got something to say and want to ask a question or have thoughts about what I'm talking about, love to have you on board for the conversation. Now I got to take my glasses out and read from the notes that I have, but like I said, I'll move them back and forth from the podium. Don't be afraid to jump in. I have a theory about Dave Nemo's voice, by the way. And it actually relates to engineering and industrial design from Raymond Loewy. Anybody know who Raymond Loewy is? You know the Shell logo? Yeah. The Exxon logo? The Coca-Cola logo? The design of Air Force One? The way the trains looked so cool that we all want to bring back, those streamlined trains? The way Greyhound buses used to look on the inside? All those really kind of cool, feels like both the future and the yesterday all in one moment. That designer is going to play a part in this conversation as well. So I want to kind of put you in a place because Dave Nemo's voice plays a part in this, if you've never heard him on the air, but I also want to put you in a place where Dave used to always say, and I love this quote, many of you know it, the future was yesterday. That you will find that we actually exist in a continuum, and that's very, very important for what we're talking about. Most of the time when people talk to you, they know. Most of the time when you come to one of these things, and that's not a knock on those people, they know. They know about safety. They know about maintenance. They know about recruiting. And the truth of the matter is, they better know. Because in the case of recruiting, in the case of safety, in the case of maintenance, we're talking about your well-being. Your bottom line, both in regards to your business and in regards to your health. They have to know. The one thing I want to make sure that you guys understand as I move forward is that I don't. That I am not sure about anything I am about to tell you over the next 25 minutes or so as we unpack this. Do you dig where I'm coming from? Because what I'm doing is most of the time when people talk to you, they talk to you at the beginning. I'm talking to you at the end. And when I say that, I mean the end of a thought, the end of a musing, the end of a feeling, the end of a notion. Which means, actually, at my end, I'm now finally at a place where we can begin. We, because it's a conversation worth having, not just in this room, but as we move forward. Let me tell you what I'm not doing today. I'm not naming names. I'm not giving you a list of who to listen to, or who to watch, or who to follow, or in some cases, who to block. You're full-grown adults. You will make your own decisions. But it is my hope that before I am done, you will look at any decisions that you make about the media you consume with a more critical eye and understand that, and in understanding that, understand why it is you choose to watch and listen and consume what it is you consume so that you can then, in understanding yourself, understand what others watch, listen, and consume. Because how can we teach anyone anything if we can't critically analyze what it is they're doing right and what it is they're doing wrong? But how can we critically analyze anyone if we can't critically analyze ourselves? What I'm seeking to do today, and by the way, the name of this lecture, discussion, notion, is an education for the airwaves, or How about hashtag ED number 4 air, ed for air, okay? How do we formalize the informal? How do we monetize once formalized without profiteering? And how do we resist? And this is the biggest part of it. And anybody here an educator? Educator. How do we not put ourselves in the center? I mean, it's like one of the hardest things to resist when something cool is happening. And we're going to be talking about some really cool things that are happening. How do we not put ourselves in the center? How do we not make it our story? How do we make it not a story where we have that main character energy? How do we avoid that? That's the core question. How do we create an apparatus that takes the informal methods, which people complete their training, because as Donnie Tolk, who is here from Tulsa Tech, can tell you, it is the informal where training actually finishes itself off. It's not in the CDL school. Sometimes it's in the hub. It's not in the trainer and the mentee and the mentor. That's all great stuff and deadly important and foundationally important, but very few people finalize their training at their CDL program. Very few people finalize their training with their first trainer, with the first person they work with the best person they work with. That's not where it happens. So how do we create an apparatus that makes the informal methods where people complete their training and guide students and trainees and those we are onboarding, even employees who have a little bit of experience, how do we create an apparatus? And Dave Harrison who's here, and I talked about this. I don't want to formalize the informal. I want to create some sort of formal network in which we can guide people through a fence, into a sandbox, into a playbox. Anybody here play Minecraft? I mean, what we're talking about here is how do we build, and anybody that plays video games knows what a sandbox is. Inside the sandbox, you do whatever the hell you please. I mean, you sleep late, you wake up at night, you blow up zombies, you build Minas Tirith, you do whatever the hell it is you're going to do in Minecraft, but there are certain boundaries that you cannot cross in a video game, that you will leave the reservation. How do we manage to create not a fence, but a perimeter, a boundary in which people are told that if you stay within these parameters here, there's a lot of creativity and a lot of opportunities to finalize your training, to kind of figure out, here are places you can go that will make this better for you. And it's more than just a handout at the end of a class. Here's the places you can check out. How do we figure out a way to guide students in the right direction to kind of get them there, okay? How do we maximize the potential of those spaces? I mean, how do we make some money off of this, by the way? That's a big question, because at the end of the day, all these great ideas, some investors are going to say, okay, so where's my money? But how do we maximize the potential of those spaces without taking away their humanity, without taking away their joy, without making them so popular that nobody goes there anymore? You know that old adage, right? Yogi Berra's great line is so popular that nobody goes there anymore. Or here's the worst one, and it's one that I'm going to emphasize throughout this entire talk. How do we avoid cynically flipping them into points of profit? And I will talk about this until Kingdom Come. There's a great term that is recently being discussed and used by a lot of people. Anybody ever heard of enshittification? You have? Anybody else? It's real simple. I mean, I call it the millennial discount. When Uber first started, man, it was a great deal, wasn't it? Postmates first started, it was a great deal. It's when you actually, it's almost like drug dealing, where you give it away for free at the beginning to show that the model works, the profiteers who have invested in it, and then once everybody is hooked and once you have the exclusionary model, you then lift your prices. Prime Video is doing it right now, where you all paid for commercial-free content, and now, well, no, we got to put commercials in, but you can pay for commercial-free content on the upgrade. That's enshittification. At least with that, once you get the commercials gone, you still have a good selection of movies, and the movies are there, but too often with enshittification, what happens? By the way, I'm not just looking for an excuse to say shit up here. It actually is a term, enshittification. But once you do that, what you've done is you have taken a community that you created by offering them a service that was invaluable, and you have profited off of them, but worse than that, you broke your contract. You promised them something, you delivered it, and then you changed the rules of the game. There are ways, by the way, of profiting off of this stuff that are completely within your rights and completely decent and honorable. It's offer something for free, and then continue offering that for free while you then offer upgrades. But whatever your initial deal with your customers are, your students are, the people you work with is, honor your damn contracts and don't pull the rug out from under them. That's the big thing. Because a lot of this stuff is actually really doable. The question is, how do we do it, attract people into it, and then not pull the rug out from under them? How do we, at the end of the day, take informal, new media training spaces and create a model for them that allows us to actually use them as part of formalized training? It's a question. I don't know if I have an answer. First of all, let's kind of talk about what an informal new media training space is. And like I said at the beginning, everything old is new again. The future was yesterday. So let's remove the word media for a moment. Informal training spaces. Let's just make it an informal training space. By the way, I'm going to ask the truckers in here, and there are a few people who drove a truck for a living for quite some time and continue to do so even as trainers. What are informal training spaces? Somebody just give me an example. Where do people learn more about trucking that doesn't involve their trainer, or maybe involves their trainer, but doesn't involve their trainer in the truck? Where do people learn more about trucking? Truck stops, yeah. Either in a booth, or outside in the parking lot, or at the gas, or at the fuel island. Truck stops. In a booth. Your trainer takes you in like, like Ethan Hawke gets taken in by Denzel Washington in Training Day, and it's led into that evil booth with the three wise men who basically let them know what the whole lay of the land is. By the way, I always tell people, take movies you really like and just transform them into trucking stuff. You remember that scene, by the way, in Training Day? It's like three actors who are like really famous just appear as the three wise men. I mean, they're all evil sons of bitches, but they have a lot of information that is necessary, and they kind of lay out the law of the land. It's an informal training session on how to be a really venal, corrupt cop. It's a pretty spectacular scene. It includes Tom Berenger and Harris Yulin and some other guy that's like famous by sight. But it gives them an authority, the idea that we go places to get information informally, right? Okay, other places. Well, social media is new media. I'm talking about non-media training, the old school stuff. Shipper receiver. I mean, because after all, we talk about how people wait on the dock forever. Well, if you're waiting on the dock forever and you're not scrolling through TikTok, what's the best thing to do? Pass the time by talking to somebody who knows what they're talking about. Keep your ear open for people out there who are talking about the old days, because often a discussion about the old days is people actually just practicing their thoughts about how to actually truck and continue to do so in a very, very formal and old school fashion. Because in the end, what is old is now new and continues to play itself through the day. Okay, so we remove the word media from training spaces, informal media training spaces. Here's another really fun one, by the way. Let's kind of play another game in regards to the words. Now let's add the word old between informal and media and remove the new. Informal old media spaces. Newspapers, magazines, the 6 o'clock news, the 6:30 national news, the 5:30 national, it depends what time zone you're in actually for that one. But you get the idea that there are old forms of media. I mean, how many of you guys still read a newspaper from pillar to post every Monday through Friday? Anybody? Anybody here get a newspaper delivered? Anybody here get a magazine delivered? Okay. That's important, and that sets up what's going to happen here. So why are these spaces so important? Okay, these are places where trust is established. We trust the people because we've chosen, right? If you go and you talk to somebody on a loading dock, and you do it again and again, it means trust has been established. That's important. The other thing is, it's not a classroom. There is no pressure of expectations. And while you might get your balls busted, you won't be shamed. So you're entering into a space where there is no pressure to learn, which means you're entering it because you have a desire to learn. You're not being pressurized to learn because of student loan debts. You're not being pressurized to learn because of parental expectations. You're not being pressured to learn because you got to get that job or to do the upgrade or get the promotion. You are talking to people in a non-pressurized situation where you have established trust, where you know that you have friends who care about you and are happy to share their information with you. And by the way, you're never told that you are stupid. All right, now I said let's kind of put the word old media in there. What advantages does that have to offer? Anybody? Nobody's there. You can set your own pace. You can set your own reality as you kind of put this together. You actually are able to do this anytime you want to. Nobody's passing judgment on it. Nobody's talking to you. You're learning at your own pace. And here's the thing, too. So we talk about the new social media, which is where we're headed next, right? So the new social media, new media, and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, whether it's radio, television, newspapers, this is where everything old is new again, because the new media that has actually succeeded in training the next generation of drivers, what is it actually doing? It's doing the same thing a newspaper is. I often joke, my friends know this about me, that my definition of the federal government is an insurance company with an army. That my definition of Southwest Airlines, at least the old proprietary model, was Greyhound with wings. That all Amazon is Sears and Roebuck on the internet. It's not as newfangled as people think it is. It isn't as advanced technology as people think it is. It's just a faster delivery system for something we've always had. So what is important about the informal meetings by coolers or by in a booth or in a parking lot or by a fuel island? The comfort is. The assurance that you won't be judged. The thought that maybe somebody will welcome you and say, hey, it's so nice to have you here. What do you need to know? And what is the joy of old media? And this is something that a lot of people, and I'm telling you right now, in the education space when it comes to trucking, have not done a lick of work on. How many people here have a favorite columnist? A Dave Barry, anybody like that? Anybody that they read on a regular basis? Anybody here have a favorite columnist, a favorite cartoonist? Anybody? You like Charles Schulz. Well, you know that every Sunday in the funny papers there will be a full color panel section with Charles Schulz's cartoon. Not only that, it will always be on the same page. Anybody knows the daily funny papers always knows that Family Circus is up in the left-hand corner in a circle. You just have to look up there. There it is, waiting for you. Anybody that's a fan of Dave Barry, if you read him in the New Orleans Times-Picayune, he was every Tuesday morning, without fail, on the front page of New Orleans' living section. There he was. And we can go on and on and on, is the fact that does it consistently show up? Does it consistently raise to the level of what it has already delivered? And does it create a level of dopamine and joy comfort that allow us to continue to kind of move forward in it? I would argue, and by the way, there are plenty of people who are very much online successes who are simply doing nothing more than delivering their humor column, delivering their information column, either in podcasting or on a TikTok page, any place else. They're simply doing a high-tech version of an analog newspaper in their delivery system, and you would be in terrible trouble if you decided to launch anything in regards to a CDL training program with any sort of social media presence if you chose not to make sure that whatever you did on a regular basis, exactly when you're supposed to do it, because I tell you what, I know of what they speak for 10 years. This would have been my 10th year in radio, and for 10 years, I'm telling you right now, anybody that listens to the Dave Nemo show knows we used to do the timeline with Claire Marie every day. We had a 2-minute section on what happened this day in history. I swear to God, after the first hour went by, if we didn't play the timeline, the phone lines lit up. Where's timeline? Where's my timeline? Where's Claire Marie? If we didn't play the national anthem, phone lines lit up. If we missed Pastor John, phone lines lit up. If we didn't do Peter Stark's Adventure series, the third Friday of every month, exactly at 9 o'clock, people would call and be like, where's Peter today? Even when I would mention it at the top of the show, I would tell people, yeah, Peter can't join us. He's over at the end of the world in Portugal right now diving off of rocks. Where is he? Why can't he broadcast from there? He did the next week, by the way. He figured out a way to broadcast to us from literally a place called the end of the world, Portugal. But he was diving off of a rock at them. If you can't deliver what you're supposed to deliver when you're supposed to deliver it, you've got no shot at this. Okay, so we all agreed what a new media space is. It's something that creates comfort or dopamine for its consumer. It is where it needs to be, when it needs to be on a regular basis. Can we all agree moving forward that's the definition of this whole thing? And in doing this, by the way, this is what it kind of comes down to. In doing this, that brings me back to Raymond Lowry. Because this is the key right now, because we're dealing with an older population of drivers who are going to need to help us kind of get the next generation online. And what Raymond Lowery always argued, and this is such the coolest thing in the world, that if your product is brand spanking new, then you need to wrap it in nostalgia to get it sold. If your product is old school, if in fact is Sears Roebuck, then you dress it up and make it look like the future is Amazon. Remember, the only advantage Amazon has on Sears Roebuck is that Amazon figures out the internet faster than they do. And starts only with books, with one small thing, and then grows from that point on. But that's what Lowery's argument is. That all advertising for anything new must be wrapped in that which is old to create comfort so the person will enter into the portal and consume it, and all stuff that is old school must be presented as the next best thing so that people will step into the portal and consume it. And that, in many ways, I think, can inform how we create some sort of education for the airwaves, because the first people you have to get into that space are not the students. You could flood a space with students. If there's nobody waiting for them, it doesn't make any difference. If there aren't people with the institutional knowledge my friend Donnie has here today, tell me your name one more time, sir. Yeah.
Kyle.
So Kyle here, how long have you been training?
6 years.
6 years over at Tulsa Tech?
Yes.
Okay, so if somebody like Kyle isn't waiting for them over there, it doesn't matter how many new people we flood in there, how many funny little memes we put up, it doesn't matter how many great lip-syncing to TikToks we put up with clever comments underneath, it doesn't make any difference. The first question is how do we get old school people, some of whom have gotten really good at figuring out social media in ways that continue to amaze me and make me kind of proud of the fact that old dogs can be taught new tricks. But there's a lot of people still uncomfortable with it, so we've got to figure out ways to get experience into the space before we can actually have any hope of people actually moving into a semi-curated space in which they can kind of exist. Okay, all of this is going towards what? More retainable, more responsible, and here's the most important part, happier drivers. Because that's what we all want, right? I mean, we want the exact opposite of somebody pushed through a CD mill, thrown behind the wheel of a truck, and only told what they need to know moments before they need to know it, because nobody wants that, do they? You got it. Everyone wants the onboarding driver to be well aware of their responsibilities and their value, because nothing is worse than a driver with 2 years' experience, a spotty driving record, an even spottier employment record, who suddenly realizes they finally figured out how to do the job and they're completely unemployable because of their spotty driving record and their spotty employment record. Wait, it's worse than that. What about the one that somehow manages to navigate all of that? Manages to hold on for dear life to a crappy job, manages to get a couple of, tens of thousands of miles under his or her belt, and then realizes the skills that they've hard-earned won, in fact, can be best put to a local route, can be best put to driving a truck for a company, and they walk out of the industry or the profession forever, and we never get them back. And while there are people in our space who are invested in that model, a proper education of the airwaves achieves what? The driver should know his or her value at the maximum point by the moment they enter into their first job. They should understand all the responsibilities of the job. They might not grasp them fully, but they should have been given every opportunity to learn all the stuff they didn't know. And like I said, it doesn't fall under the job of the CDL program either. That's only part of the process. How do we make sure? This is the crucial thing, and it's the thing that just kills me. If the drivers figured out how much they were worth before they got started, I think a lot of companies would be forced to make some really different financial decisions about how we onboard those people, because a lot of these men and women don't know their value until their record has been wrecked or their spirit has been broken, and it's got to stop. And I think that the only place that we can really, truly stop it is informally. In other words, we've got to learn more, we've got to teach less, and we've got to get ourselves integrated. Because it all begins, I don't know how much time I have here, guys. I have a feeling I'm overshooting my mark completely, but I'm going to say this right now. We have to start by figuring out the things that we enjoy and why we enjoy them. We have more opportunities than ever to figure this out, and we afford ourselves less time. I sometimes believe, because we're off chasing gradually diminishing joy, that we don't take the time to figure out what exactly it is that gives us joy. That we're adrenaline and dopamine junkies in pursuit of the next high, so we don't have any reflective time. And because we have not found out why we like what we like, how the hell can we find out what anybody else likes? Because if we can't do that, if we can't figure out what we like, how can we create environments for anybody else to enjoy? I mean, how many of you ever have done that? And by the way, it's no criticism. The world is a fast and terrible place. It moves, it destroys, and we're like the Angelus Novus. We're blown backwards into the future. So all we can see is the wreckage we've left and nothing that's coming up the way. But I'm going to ask you honestly, how many of you have ever taken and sat down and said, name 3 movies, 3 podcasts, 3 television shows, 3 albums that I like, and sat down and took the time to write out why it is you like them? Anybody here done that? And by the way, if you haven't, it's okay. Has anybody here done that? Well, give me 3 albums you love.
So, if you own a rock and roll collection, you've got to have a Laker by the car.
I'll go with that.
You gotta have it. Then, if we was to go over to Prince, I'm a huge Prince fan. You know, can't go wrong with, of course, the Purple Rain. And then, I can't remember the name of the album, but Jerry Reed's got one that's pretty cool. It's got his greatest hits. We'll just go with that.
I'll go with this. You're a fan of Virtuoso Joy. You like people who sit in the center of their world and create a world, because Prince and Jerry Reed in very, very different ways, and the Cult, by the way, which really is a one-man show, is really the idea of one person kind of pulling the whole world together and exercising power in all different directions and showing the full breadth of their talent. By the way, take the time to figure out what it is you like so you can figure out a way to figure out what it is they like. Because once you do the analysis on yourself, once you figure out your big 3, your big 4, I promise you, list your favorite 3 albums, list your favorite 3 movies, list your favorite 3 books. You're going to find out certain patterns begin to emerge. My friend over here, Rebecca's a secret revolutionary. Everything you named the other night, I'm like, man, you're like, I mean, you're ready to like toss a little bomb and walk away from the garbage dump. You know what I'm saying? But no, you can tell that everybody, it's really cool though. Like I said, okay, blonde lady, on the end, give me 3 movies you like. Okay.
I like the Rocky movies.
Okay.
And I like Disney movies. Hercules.
But you named Hercules, which is spectacular because everything you named is about underdogs who actually work for it. You didn't just name every Disney movie. The first one that popped into your head was about underdogs who work for it. Who put the glad in Gladiator? By the way, the joyful warrior himself, Hercules. But the idea that it's like the stories you like. If you like the Rocky movies, you like, and Dirty Dancing, you like happy warriors who actually bust their ass to earn the things that they want in their life. Tell me I'm wrong. But that's the thing, too. So when you figure out what you like, you figure out how what you like is built. And when you figure out how what you like is built, it doesn't mean you suddenly become a movie maker or an author or a musician, but it does mean you understand the structure and the pattern of it and how it's created. And if you figure out what you like, you can start looking at what other people like. So Randy's with CDL Life, and I figured out something from looking over that site over and over again. It's very popular. It's got a lot of people there. There is a certain basic sloppiness to the site, and I don't mean that as an insult. What's underneath the site is it's a great platform, but there's a certain kind of informal simplicity to it. And I think in many ways that appeals to a lot of people. I would make now, anybody here not know who Dave Nemo is? It's okay if you don't. Anybody here not know who Dave Nemo is? I am willing to bet that Dave got away with murder for about 10 years by creating educational content, but having a voice that made it sound like a bunch of people having fun. That you could make a case that Dave Nemo's voice was so old school radio and so gentle and kind that it was almost like listening to the trucking version of Mr. Rogers talking to adults. It was a good day, wasn't it? Hey, neighbor. I mean, it really is. It's the same sort of comfort, the idea that it doesn't create adrenaline, but it creates joy. They're not the same thing, by the way. All right. The one other thing I want to kind of set up here in regards to all of this stuff is we've got to have a long conversation, and this goes back to analyzing yourself and analyzing what the truckers like as well, too, of distinguishing between trucking media communities. Because there really are 3 different kinds of shows that truckers like. There are trucking shows, And by the way, there are too many trucking shows right now. Trucking shows are shows that are about the supply chain. They're about drivers, but they're about the supply chain. They're about the maintenance almost purely. They're about the rules and regs almost purely. They're about nothing more than what it means to be an employed trucker. The second kind is interesting. It's shows for truckers. What's the difference? You can have a golf show for truckers. You can have a hunting show for truckers. You can have a music show for truckers. There was one, as a matter of fact. It was, 40 years on the radio before Sirius took the music away? You can have a music show for truckers. I'll give you an example of what a golf show for truckers would look like. A show for truckers can be about anything you want it to be, including trucking, but at the end of the day, the producer and the host must acknowledge that the core base audience is truckers, meaning, as Charlie Douglas used to say, you are welcomed here if you're not a trucker, but if you get lost, it ain't our job to catch you up. That a golf show for truckers would involve talking about not only golf courses, but making a point of finding golf courses off the interstate. Would be making a point of finding golf courses where you can get a late tee time, or where you can get a late booking for a tee time. Where, the idea that you would be constantly looking for things that would set them up. Video games, for me, by the way, we would do segments on the Dave Nemo Show about video gaming through the filter of truckers. I don't know if you guys know this, there is a whole community of truckers where the back of their cabs are set up like literally man caves where they play online. And that if you do a show for truckers about video games, what does that show have? That show knows what you can play in what you can play on a 10-minute downtime, what you can play on the hour break, what you can play on your 10, while still making sure it's only 2 so you can get 8 hours of sleep. What you can play on your 34, and what you can play with your family when you get home. That show would also find communities that you could plug into where there are other truckers or potentially veterans or people of like minds, where it's non-toxic to keep your levels of dopamine rage down and all of that kind of stuff. That's a show for truckers, and by the way, there is a dearth of them right now. And that's the absolute truth. And I think that's where the action lays. The last kind, guys, by the way, is all the stuff we just were talking about. Purple Rain, The Cult, Who Put the Glad in Gladiator, Hercules. Bless my soul, Herc was on a roll. I have nieces and nephews, can you tell? It shows the truckers like. We just talked about the Conan O'Brien podcast. And by the way, I'm not naming shows that we've proven truckers like. I'm just saying anything that if you could do the numbers, crunch the numbers, and see where truckers are going when they're not listening to trucking stuff, those would be shows that truckers like. Charlie Douglas's Axiom Reverses. We love having you here. It's great to have you here. Don't toxify our space with trucking nonsense. You're here because you're part of another community, and a lot of them love that because it means they're a part of another community. I would suggest that anybody looking to put together a good show for truckers or a good show that it's about trucking, make a point of reverse the streams. If you find out that a lot of truckers are listening to a podcast or a curated show of any sort of quality, I would really say, what is that show doing right? And export as much of that as you can into the other two. It never hurts. It's Raymond Lowery's theory, once again. You're wrapping a show about trucking in whatever it is Conan O'Brien is doing right. You're making the decision that Joe Rogan, whatever his problems are, meat lughead that he is, you're making the decision that what he does do is he does give people a chance to talk without interrupting them and lets them go on. Sometimes spin themselves into their own grave, sometimes burnish their reputation. But you might say, hey, I want to have a trucking show where I give my guest a chance to breathe and really unpack their ideas. All of this, by the way, I hope you can see where I'm headed with this in regards to education. Okay, because it really kind of comes down to any time you want to build what we're talking about here is that all of those things are irrelevant. None of those shows work, actually, if they were not building communities. Because that's the real struggle we have, isn't it? How do we recognize when a community either is curated into existence properly or springs up organically? How do we actually let other people know to go to those communities where they can learn more? How do we go about doing that? How do we create that world where people are given permission to go find those places without taking over those spaces? And I have just a couple of thoughts. Like I said, anybody know how much time I got left? I'm out of time. Well, I almost got to the point. Here's what it kind of comes down to. There is a man named Daniel. I got two people for you, and I literally, do me a favor, if anybody could time me when I get to 2 minutes, put your hands up, and I'll just simply stop talking. What's that? Thank you very much. An organic community, by the way, Daniel Zoller has a wonderful, it's got less than 1,000 people on it. It's called New York to LA. It's an Instagram community that he created. And he wrote this wonderful line that is the beginning of the notion of the conversation. I've met dozens of people through New York and LA. Nothing makes me happier than introducing LA newcomers to new friends, giving them tips and helping them settle in. I know how hard it is to feel at home in a new city. I've been there. I think, and I'm really shortening this, I think that the real key to creating new forms of education and finishing education through the informality of informal training spaces comes down to becoming a member of those spaces for trainers and people who think those places create what we want them to create, and being a member who puts themselves in there and simply acts as an ambassador for them. Have you ever felt like you've been excluded from something really fun? George M. Cohan had a great line. He spent his whole life as an actor-manager opposed to Actors' Equity, fought it like hell, and at the end of the day, I told you this, Dave, they said, George, you're an actor. Why did you fight Actors' Equity all your life? And he looked at the person who asked him, he goes, they never invited me. Next week, by the way, they had a big ceremony where they inducted George M. Cohan into Actors' Equity, did the invitation and all that. And while he still would negotiate tough as hell with them, he always had a soft spot for them. We've all been on the outside looking in. Trucking can often do that to people, leave them feeling very alone and very, very lost, especially when they go to the wrong training program that gets them through in 24 hours, when they go to the company that sees them as meat in the seat. Isn't it nice to know that maybe there's somebody out there who looks across a counter and one day sees a guy a little bit lost in the parking lot and say, hey, I don't have a lot of time today. I can help you back up, but I got to get going myself. Here's a couple of online places you can go. Ask for me. I'm not in charge, but I'll show you the way. I ran out of time. I overtalked myself. I'm not surprised about that, but thank you all so very much. It's been a nice way to spend the end of Match with you. And by the way, give these people in the back a big round of applause. They have been here all day long doing this for a lot of people. I'm around to talk if you want to. Thank you, guys.